Hey everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad, Gustafson, and I share two books that we love, yes, and that we think you should read when, Brad?
Don't delay, people. Read them right now.
Right now. Brad, I'm going to break with tradition and ask if I can go first this week.
Oh, yeah. Nail it. Throw
It's
down the
crazy, right?
gun.
I know, right? I want to go first because my book talk is a little long. And so, therefore, I know it's going to be long because I want to tell a personal story to begin with. And
Oh,
that way you can, give me a time signal or something. You can cut me off when it's your turn or whatever. But
perfect. And let me do a pre-book talk just to really
yes,
set the hook, because when you said personal story, I knew I was all in. So
yeah.
I'm I'm captivated. I have my first ever. I'm breaking the mold today. Something we've never done. I've
Oh
never
my
done
gosh.
before, and I'm so excited. So there you have it.
I, longtime viewers, our three longtime viewers of this show know that we rarely ever, only once have we ever planned the show. So
Yeah.
I'm just as surprised by all of this as those three people are. I can't wait. I'm excited. I'm really excited. Well, I got to tell you, I read a number of books this week, and the one that I think is going to stick with me the longest is the one I want to talk about today. And you ever read a book where, like, right in the beginning something happens to remind you, like to call up a memory that maybe you hadn't thought about in a long time, and suddenly you're just in, like, you feel connected to that book in
Yes,
a way that is really pretty visceral just because of that connection, right? Well,
for sure.
that happened to me for this book. So I'm going to tell this quick story. Back in the day when I was an 8th grade language arts teacher in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, my very first year teaching, I read in the newspaper. Now that'll show you how long ago this was, that it was, I was reading it in the newspaper, that Maya Angelou was going to be signing books at a local Black owned bookstore in Winston-Salem. And I had a few of her books in my classroom library. And so I arranged for a few of my students. Basically, what I said to them is I'll take you to this signing. And if you can get her to sign whatever copy of this book that I had, then you can keep it. That was basically it, right? Like that was the deal. And so I'll never forget it because it was my first year teaching, and there were a lot of mistakes I made in this whole after school field trip extravaganza, but I'm not going to focus on those. I'm going to focus on the fact that I took these 3 or 4 kiddos out to dinner at the Burger King because it was all that I could afford. And we rocked up to the bookstore. There was lots of people in line, of course, to see her. She happened to live there in the same city, so that's why she was there. And we get in the line, we're waiting, and we're about halfway through the line. We can see her over in like a corner, and one of her handlers announces, Miss Angelou will only be signing copies of her current books. She won't be signing copies of other books. Well, of course, we all had old paperbacks from my classroom library, right? And I couldn't afford to buy all these kids new hardcover editions of her books. So I just said to them, y'all look really, really cute. Blink your eyes a lot when you get up there, like we're going to just play every cuteness card we have. So you have to understand that I taught in like an urban area. My school was very high poverty. My school was right smack dab in between several public housing projects, and all of my students lived in those projects. And so when we get up there, this was a big deal. Like, this was a big deal. This is the first author they had ever met. And we got up there, and I will never forget. And this is the piece of the story that is so memorable to me. Not only did she sign all of their books, and that was a win, but she asked each one of them what their name was. And then she took a minute to tell them what their name meant in another language. Now, I had a kid at the time whose name was Reggie, and he was with me, and Reggie went through the line, and she asked him what his name was, and she told him that meant king. And then she said, I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. She said, I don't care what has happened to you since that day. On the day that you were born, your mother chose that name for you. She chose the name that meant king. Now, how are you going to live up to that? And I mean, like, the thing to know about Reggie is there were no men in his life. They were all in prison or dead. His mom had lots of issues. Reggie was not on the fast track to what we would say was typical success. And that moment changed his life. When he got back to school, we were no longer allowed to call him Reggie. He was Reginald, and that meant king, and we needed to treat him that way. And I kept up with Reggie for years after that. And I feel like that moment with Maya Angelou was a pivotal moment for him. And this book reminded me of it because the main character's name is King, named after his dad, Reginald. And at the beginning of the book, they tell King, we named you this for a reason. You need to live up to that name. And so, of course, like, it just like spoke straight to my soul, right? In a really important way. And of course, it brought all of that up. But as I read the book, oh my gosh, Brad, there's so much I want to tell you about this book, but let me first start with the title. It's called King and the Dragonflies, and it's by Kacen Callender. And this is an arc, but it's out. It's been out since February, so people watching it can buy it now. But it's basically the story of really two families. King is the central protagonist. We hear the story through his eyes. But it's really the story of two boys and their families. King and his family, who have just gone through a terrible, terrible loss, and how they are dealing with that. And then King's best friend, Sandy, whose family has a reputation for the racist terror that they inflict on the small town that they both live in. And Sandy, who's trying to break free and be something different from what his family has always been. Now, these two boys shouldn't be best friends, like on paper, right? But they are, until one night they're out in King's yard in a tent, just camping out at night in the backyard, as kids do. And King's older brother, Khalid, overhears a conversation in which Sandy admits to King that he's gay. The next day, Khalid tells King that he can no longer be friends with Sandy and they need to stop being friends. So King takes his brother's advice and tells Sandy they can't be friends anymore, which in and of itself is heartbreaking. But then, like, within a few days, Khalid dies mysteriously. And then a few days after that, Sandy disappears mysteriously. And here's King left with the ownness of his name to live up to, wondering what's happened to the two really most important male figures in his life and what he's going to do about it. And that is King and the Dragonflies by Kacen Callender.
That, people, is how you book talk. Pack
oh
your
my gosh.
Up, show's over. That was incredible. Gosh.
It's so good. The book is so good, Brad. You can't, I cried, I laughed, I love this book. Top 5 of the year for sure.
Wow, that was riveting. I got emotional listening to that.
I got emotional telling it.
Then I just gotta say, I can't think of an example. We've known each other for many years. Mm-hmm. I can't think of a text, an email, a book talk, a check-in, a face-to-face meeting where I've ever walked away from talking to you not being a better human being, or thinking, feeling grateful that you're in my life and in the light and in the world, helping and sharing. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And
that means so much to me. Thank you, my friend.
I mean that, and in a really superficial way too. I always walk away thinking, I don't deserve Jen in my life. I feel like you accept me for my superficialness, the lack of depth I bring to this show. Thank goodness for the law of averages, right?
Dude,
Um,
it's the Captain America golf cart. I'm in
yeah,
it just for the hopes that one day I'm going to get a ride in the Captain America golf cart. That's it.
duly noted. Duly noted. Okay,
Love you too. Mwah.
I should stick with the theme of the show because I could gush and show gratitude for a while. And actually, I'm going to do 10 more seconds. So at the beginning of the show, I think it was before we hit record, I look over my shoulder. I'm like, Jen, does that bowl look bad? Like, is that a bad background? And then I confided in Jen. I'm like, the truth of the matter is, I'm in love with that bowl. I picked it out. I love the bowl, but I don't know if I want the world to know I love the bowl. And Jen's like, own your bowl, Brad. And like that's steadfast. I mean, that's the kind of friendship I need. Above and beyond the literacy. Goodness gracious. Okay. Okay. Jen.
I love you too. Mwah.
That was incredible. And in a couple of weeks, I did just finish a book that brought me viscerally back to a moment in time. I'll share that in a couple of weeks. And it's fun to have that kind of parallel connection.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do that I've never done before on the show, and I think it's only been done maybe once before, but I am going to double book talk, and I haven't.
Oh my gosh.
I'll shorten them both a little bit, but I do want to say I love cooking. I don't know if everyone knows that or if our 3 faithful viewers know that. So it reminds me, the reason I'm going to double book talk is that the cartoon Ratatouille, this mouse who cooks, like he talks about how, like, I think he said wine and cheese or certain things complement one another really well. It's a flavor that's better than eating the things separately. And I first experienced that as a reader with the Truth as Told by Mason Buttle. I think I got that right. And
yes.
Wish Tree. 2 unrelated books, but the point of view of the tree just so, like, those are books, and I'm glad I read them back to back because it was like Ratatouille and cooking. So that's why I'm double book talking today, because I've been on this little mini history kick, and the 2 books go together so well but so differently. So the first one I'm going to share, I think I'll go with the heavier here. This is like World War II era, and I've been getting into these wrinkles in history that I just didn't learn before, just deeper into this stuff. And long story short, this is by Samantha Seiple or Seiple, I'm not sure. It's basically the story of 8 Hitler and Nazi Germany sent spies over to infiltrate and destroy infrastructure, like plants, highways, things that would, America's ability to respond in the war. And the story plays out in a really dramatic fashion. It's really interesting to hear all their stories. And I'm just going to leave it at that. It's a really interesting story about people, how sometimes they get roped into things, sometimes they get pressured into things, sometimes they want to do bad things, sometimes they have no clue, how their family's affected. Just lots of interesting, bad news, powerful stuff, but also some heroism too. So I read that. I read actually another World War II book before that. It was kind of a different angle, but what I wanted to also share, this, and by the way, I should say this one came out December of 2019. So this is available right now. This one is like a few months away, okay? But anyway,
I want to read that book. That race cars one is on my list. I want to read it, so I'm jealous right now.
And I would honestly, I am suggesting like that. There's a reason I'm book talking them together. Like read them back to back in one of these orders, because for me it's so fascinating to read the history and the nuances and all these aspects of life that are happening amidst, the war, right? Because growing up, I just looked at, like there's a war and you think that's it, but there are stories and heartbreak and innovation and hope and stories of courage and all these side stories that some of them turned into the main story. But the quick book talk on The Racers by Neal Bascomb. Neal did a ton of research to put this together in a seamless way. And the coolest thing is it doesn't just hone in on one race car driver. It hones in on this international competition, I think 1920 or so, but you get to see Italy's prowess. You get to see Germany's prowess. You get to see the countries that are struggling just in racing. And it's fascinating how they're battling and how they kind of equated their national pride into racing. And I'm not a big race car person, but this book like gripped me. And you can see it's falling apart. I was reading it outside in like 100-degree weather, so I think it did a number on the glue or the binding. But anyway, that's my book talk. And I wish maybe if anyone knows, you'll know this. Is there a word for like I've said puddles before, but that's not like wells of books, like things that are just kind of they go together really well, and you can kind of dip in and go deeper than one book. I don't think book ladder or reading ladder is what this is.
There probably is. I mean, often a lot of times I'll have my students do like book matchmaking where they pair up books, especially like ones that are unexpected, where you pair up two books that wouldn't look like they go together, but actually go together perfectly and complement one another. And so I have them do those, but I call it book matchmaking, but there's probably a smarter term that someone else has, coined that I just don't know of.
Okay, cool. And actually I book talked, I think it was last week, War Stories by, was it Gordon Corman, I think?
Yes.
Okay. That was another one that actually went with this trifecta of books because it was just so cool, and I love the different genres and angles, and just it's so cool. So I'm feeling great as a reader, just very fulfilled and refreshed with these two, and that's my matchmaking book talk, Jen. Read those. I
love it.
Both of them. Read them right now, and actually read the other one read this one in October.
Okay, you'll have one to keep you busy till the other one comes out.
Right, exactly.
Perfect. I love it. Well, Brad, I think this one might have been one of our best shows ever. Not only did we book talk 3 books, but we coined the hashtag Own Your Bowl.
Nice.
Yes.
In case there's any doubt, wouldn't it have been terrible if I accidentally dropped it? But
please,
just look at the contours on this thing. It's just so interesting. It's love gorgeous. It. Anyway, my wife comes in and she's like, "What are you doing?"
I love it. Of course, I bet she does that a lot. I think coming into the room and going, "What are you doing?" is probably. I love it. So, Brad, if our 3 viewers and their friends want to check out our archives or the list of books we've recommended over the years, where can they go?
Yeah, head on over to bit.ly/read_this_now, and there's a lot of good resource there.
Yay. Thank you, friend. I'll see you next week, and happy reading, everyone.